Hi, my name is Julius. Yeah, welcome to my channel and to my tutorial on Express.js. In this video, I'll be teaching you how to use the most popular Node.js web framework, Express.js. Express.js is the basis of thousands of sites and it is widely used by developers worldwide. It is a powerful tool that allows you to build scalable and robust web applications with ease. In this tutorial, I'll be breaking down every important aspect of Express so you can truly master it. We'll cover all the basics of Express.js framework, including the project setup, the server setup, basic routing, sending data, rendering HTML, routers, advanced routing, middleware, rendering static files, parsing form or JSON data, and parse query parameters. So, what is Express.js? Express.js is a minimalist and flexible web application framework for Node.js that provides a robust set of features for building web and mobile applications. This is coming from their website, expressjs.com. But you can think of it as a package that contains all the tools that you need to build your REST APIs. So that is the application of Express.js that we are going to be considering today. What should you know before following this tutorial? So you first have to know JavaScript. Okay, it can be basic. You also have to know about Node.js and then NPM. For JavaScript, there are lots of tutorials on YouTube that teaches you JavaScript. If you also want me to do a tutorial like that, you can also enter that one in the comment. For Node.js and NPM too, same. The project we'll be building while learning about Express is going to be a simple REST API web server. We are going to provide endpoints for which requests can be made by the client to access or modify resources. So in this case, the client can be a web, desktop, or mobile application. And then these requests to modify resources or create resources are usually called CRUD or CRUD operations. The server will then return responses based on the request or the resources that the client wants to access. It should be noted that everything in this project is going to run locally on our device. I'll do another tutorial teaching how to deploy backend applications across the internet. So watch out for that. We'll call the server game start. This server is going to provide information about games and reviews for those games. It will also provide an endpoint for users to create games and reviews for those games. Okay, back to the IDE. Inside the IDE, we can see the project's structure. So we have a folder called game start. We also have a subfolder called starter files. We have a file called server.js. Server.js is going to be the entry point of our app. And then it is also going to be where we write the core logic for the app or the project we are coming to create. We also have the starter files. This starter files contains two files. One is data.js. Data.js contains the data we'll need for the app. So in here, you can see that in the games, it is just an array of game objects. For the game objects, it looks like this. It has an ID, a name, platform, and then rating. And then we also have the review array or reviews array. That one also has reviews object. So that one also has an ID, review, rating, and then a game. The commented texts are just endpoints we'll be creating whilst working on this project. And then we have plant.js. This is an image, and then I'll explain later what we use this image for. Okay, now the next thing we have to do is to initialize this project using npm, and then we also have to install Express. In order to do that, we just have to pull out the terminal and then do npm init -- yes. So this is going to initialize the project with some default configurations. So inside the package.json, you can see that we don't have any dependencies over here. So we can just do npm install Express. This is going to install Express from npm. And then, yes, we now have it in our dependencies. We can now go to server.js and then create our first um, backend server. Okay, in order to do this, we have to import Express. So we can do const Express and then require Express. Now that we have hold of Express, we have to create an app instance from Express. Okay, so we do const app and then we call Express. So calling Express is now going to create an app instance and then assign it to app. Now, after we are done with that, if we do app dot, you can see that we have several methods on app that we can use to build our REST API. Okay, but for now, we just want to do app.listen. The listen takes two parameters. So a port number. In this case, let me just create a constant at the top. I'll call it port. Okay, and then I'll assign it to 3000, and then pass port. Okay, and then pass a callback. Now, what is a callback? So basically, a callback is a function that is passed as an argument to another function. Okay, and it's executed after the calling function has been executed. Okay, so after the app listens on port 3000, whatever we specify in the callback is what is going to be executed. So in this case, we just want to do maybe log server. So server running on port 3000. Okay. Now let's try something here. If we open a new tab in a browser and we type in localhost 3000, you see that nothing happens. It says that cannot reach page. Okay, so let's go back to the IDE and then run the code. Now, if we do node and then server.js, so that's the name of our file. Now it says that running on port 3000. What we see over here is what we've specified over here, the console, the log that we've done. Okay, now let's get back to the browser. Now in the browser, we just enter localhost 3000 again, and then this time we cannot get /. So we are getting something right. Yeah, this is better than what we had before. Before it says that it could not reach the page. However, in this case, we've got something. It's just that it says cannot get /. Now, what this means is that the route has not been defined. Okay, this particular route or this particular path has not been defined. So I'll go ahead and then show you how to define the route. Okay, so to define the route, we use the app instance once again. So app dot, and then we want to do a get. Okay, the first parameter is going to be the path. So in this case, /. And then the next argument is going to be a middleware. Okay, it is also a callback, but this one is a special callback. We call it a middleware. I'll explain what middleware is. So request, response, next. Okay. Now for the middlewares, they come with three parameters. Okay, request, response, and next. Each of these parameters gives us the ability to perform certain operations. Maybe I'll call it. Okay, so let's just do response.send. Okay, in here we'll just say hello. We're going to run this again. Okay, server running on port 3000. Let's go to the browser. We'll hit enter again, and then this time we get hello. Okay, this is because we have defined the path. Okay, so this is how to write your REST API backend. So you just have your app instance, and then you call the particular HTTP verb you want to use, and then you pass in a route, and then you pass in a route, then you pass in a middleware. Okay. All right. So in here we have like I said, we have the HTTP verb, which is get, and then we have the route, that's /, and this is our middleware. Okay, the middleware function. All right. I want to add console.clear here. So this is just going to clear the console anytime we restart the server. Okay, yeah, so that we can start with a clean console. All right. So to continue with the project, we have to define this route. I'm going to move the games array to server.js. Then we can start working with it. So what I'm going to do is this. Let's say, let's say, let's say a user wants to request for all games. In order to do that, we can create yeah, let's copy this one. So copy and paste is not advisable, but just for tutorial purposes, I'm going to do this so that we can make things quicker. API v1 slash games. So in order to return all games, we want to create this endpoint API v1 slash games, where the games is the resource that we want to access. So in this case, all the games, and then v1 is the version of the API. In the near future, if we want to provide another version of the same API, we can do maybe API slash v2 slash games. Okay, so that one will have a different signature, okay, compared to the first one. So instead of doing response.send, I want to do response.json. This is how I prefer to do it. You pass in an object, okay, and then you do status, and, and then we have success. Then you add data, and then we call that one games. So all I'm doing over here is I'm returning a JSON, and then the status is success, and then the data that we want to return, in this case, games. That sounds fair. Now let us just restart the app again. Let's go back to the browser. Let us type localhost 3000, but we want slash API slash v1 slash games. Okay. So this is going to return the JSON that we want the client to receive. You see, status and then data, just like how we defined it in the code. There is also something else I want you to see. So if you pull up the inspector, right? So you can use Control Shift and I on Windows, and then you check the network side or the network tab. If we refresh this, we can see that we have a request over here. It says that what's the status code? It says that 304 not modified. Don't worry about the status code. It's supposed to be 200. The reason why it is saying not modified is because we have not refreshed the page, right? So it's like it is just trying to hit the same request. It has been cached somehow. So I'll just do command, or let me say control, and then refresh. So this should return 200 now. So it did a fresh request to the server, the Node.js server we have created. Now in here, we have the status code of 200. Okay, so you can also change the status code programmatically. However, if the request is successful, ideally it's supposed to be 200. Okay, if the resource that the user is trying to find or the client is trying to find does not exist, you can use maybe 404 for not found. In order to do that in Express, this is how you do it. So in the response.json, right? So if you do response dot, you are able to add status, okay, and then you chain the .json method. In here, it's you have to pass a number, okay, so that's the status code number. So we can call it 500. Let us restart this. Back to the browser, and then pull out the inspector. Let us do a hard refresh. Now we see that the status code 500 is being used now, and that one has internal server error attached to it. So that's what the status code means. However, the request was successful. Okay, so we are not supposed to return 500. Okay, so just watch out for that one. I wanted to show you how to add status codes to your request. In the example, we added 500. That's why 500 is being shown. Okay, there are also other things that you can find on the header of the request. So you can also see X powered by. You can also see Express over here. So this is telling you the kind of server we are running, right? So it is an Express server. Now let us add the correct status code. So in here, we just call it 200. And let's just test it. In the browser, we do a hard refresh. Okay, so now we get 200. Okay, it looks good. Now let's say the client wants to get just one game object. Okay, so in this case, maybe a game with an ID of 2. How do you do that? In order to do this, we use something called parameters. This is how the endpoint will look like. So it's going to be API/v1/games, and then we do a forward slash, and then we add the ID. So we can do something like 2. But if we do this, it says that cannot get, and then it gives us the endpoint. So what is happening is, like I said before, this is because this route has not been defined. Okay, but that's not what we want. We want the 2 to be a parameter instead of a route. So let's get back to the code and then write the route properly. To make provision for the client to be able to get just one game by the ID, we do app dot, or let me just copy what we have here, because it is the same get request, right? But instead of /games, we do semicolon, and then we add ID. Okay, so what we have over here now becomes a parameter. So we are just telling Express that if anything comes after games, okay, and then if anything comes after games, what is next is an ID. So to prove that, I'll just do a console.log, and then we can get the parameters from the request. Okay, so request dot, and we just do params. We are going to log it, and then over here, okay, we just keep it the way it is. Let us restart the server. Back in the browser, let us press enter. So we did /2. This time the request was successful. Let's get back to the code. Inside the code, we can see an ID of 2. Okay, this ID of 2 objects we are seeing over here is coming from line 15. Okay, we are doing a request.params. So all the params on the request is what is being shown over here. If we change ID to any other value, let's say rating. Okay, let's just restart the app. Back to the browser, enter, back to the code. We see that rating is now 2. Okay, this rating is coming from what we have over here. Because we changed the value to rating, it will now be called rating, but we want it to be ID. So we just put ID here. Now I'm going to write a logic for returning a game, okay, based on the ID. So we can call that const game, and then it is an array, right? So we can use some array functions. So games dot, we can say find, and then we pass in a callback, and then this will be element, right? So element dot ID, and then we compare it to request dot params dot ID. So what I'm trying to do over here is I'm trying to get the element whose ID is equal to whatever we are getting from request.params .id. But there's going to be a problem over here. This is because ID, okay, whatever you specify in the parameter is seen as a string. So even though I entered an integer 2, which I wanted it to be an integer, right? In this case, it is being passed as a string. So what I can do is I have to just convert it back to an integer. So I can do pass int. So pass int, and then put this into that. Okay, Now I'll get my hands on the game. So instead of returning games this time, I want to return just game. Let us test this. Now to the browser, enter, sweet. Now we are getting a response from the server with a status of success, and then the data is now a game with an ID of 2. What if we want to do a game with an ID of 4? Okay, now we have a game with an ID of 4. What about a game with an ID of 1? A game with an ID of 1. We have been able to create the routes to get the game's resources, the generic get route to get all games, then the specific get route to get a game by ID using parameters. Speaking of parameters, there is also another field on the request called query, which we can use to filter and query other our resources. Here's what I mean. So if you look at, for example, the game's endpoint, right? The game's endpoint. We can do request dot query. You see, so this query object, it allows us to add a query to the request. So for example, if we want to return all games, okay, but filter it by, let's say, rating, or maybe sort it out, like sort it in maybe ascending order, this is what the query is used for. So it allows you to specify what you want to return, or like how you want to return the data. Okay, that's what the query is mostly used for. So just as an example, we are just going to log what the request or query looks like. Let us start a server. Node. Then let's go to the browser. So in the browser, let's just type localhost 3000. And now let's just hit the games endpoint, because that's where we are logging request.query. Okay, we are logging it on the games endpoint. So we can do slash API slash v1 slash games. Now after hitting API slash v1 slash games, we'll be able to see the query object. Now let us get back to the IDE. Now in the IDE, we see that we have an empty object. Okay, so that is happening on slash API slash v1 slash games. Now in order to add a query to the request, we have to use the question mark and then add the variable and then its value. So not really a variable, it's more like a key. Okay, the key and then its value. So it's like a key value per thing. So let's get back to the web browser. So I'm going to add a query here. So a question mark. So I can call it, let's say, rating, and then equals, we can make it maybe 10, and then send this request. So if I send a request, it doesn't fail, right? Because we are hitting the game's endpoint, and then everything coming after the question mark is going to be a query. So we are still able to get the games. However, let us see what the query looks like now. Now in the IDE, we can see that we are having rating equals 10. Okay, we can add multiple queries to the request. So in this case, I'll add name and then let's say platform. In order to add name and platform, you can just use the and or ampersand, right? Let's add platform equals PC, and then another and let's say name equals we'll call it maybe element 6, then submit this request. Let's just see what the query looks like now. All right, so in the current in the previous request that we submitted with the query, we can see the rating, we can see the platform, we can see name, because these are the queries that we supplied to the request. Therefore, that is what is showing over here. So by leveraging the power of the query object on the request, you'll be able to refine the data that is being sent to the client, like using the query as filter to retrieve data from the database. We have looked at read operations in CRUD. Now we are going to build endpoints to create, update, and delete resources. But before that happens, let us refactor the code we have so far. just to keep it clean and then maintain our sanity. Let's first get rid of this console.log. Next, I want to extract all of these endpoints into a special folder. Okay, we'll call that one routes. So routes, and then inside this folder, I'm going to add a file. I'll call it games routes. Okay, .js. And then I'm going to move these endpoints. What we're trying to do here is to refactor and also let every single file has like one responsibility. Okay, and then we have to move this games object, this games array into that file. So in here we will add it. This looks good. The next thing we have to do is to get rid of the app. Okay, in order to do that, we have to use the router. This is also provided by Express, so we can have something called router. But before that, let us import Express. So const Express and then require Express. Okay, now that we have Express, let us do Express dot router. Nice. We have the router created. Now we're going to replace all the occurrences of app with router. And then we'll export router. This looks good. So we are just trying to achieve what we had before, but this time with the router. Okay. So we've exported the router. We have to now import the router. I can say const games route and then require. We can find it inside route, then games route. Now that we have the games route, in order to use that route, okay, we just have to do app.use and then we pass games route. But then we also have to specify the path, okay, or the route. So we can say /API /v1/games. If we provide a route in here, then we have to also get inside games route and then remove this side of the code. So we will remove all occurrences. And then in here, I can just do 1//. So this should fix it. Everything looks good to me. Let us restart the server. We are going to test this. Here in the browser, let us hit localhost 3000, then /games, no, localhost 3000 /API /v1/games. You see, it is working now. We can also get a game with an ID of 1. It is working. So all we did was simply just to refactor the routes. Okay, we can also do more refactoring. So let's get back to the code. In the games route, I want to remove all the logic we have over here. So like the actual logic that we need to retrieve the games, I want to move all that logic into a different file. We'll call that one controllers. So assuming we are using the MVC architecture, we just extract all this logic into the controllers folder. So we just create a new folder. We just call it controllers. And then we add another file. We'll call it games controller.js. Then we have to move this games array in here. And then for this side of the code, okay, for the middleware function side, we can extract everything here into this file and then make it a controller. So the one I cut, it was the get games by ID. So we can do exports dot get game by ID, or we can even call it get game. Okay, I think that one is simple. Get game. So this is going to return just one game. We can also do another exports dot, we'll call that one get all games. Let us cut that logic. So I have taken that one out. So I simply assign it to this function. Now we have to import the logic from games controller. So in order to do that, we can do this const game controller and then require one level up controllers slash games controller. In here, we do games controller dot get game. Then in the next one, we do game controller dot get all games. We can get rid of, oh, what happened? I think I've removed the router equals express dot router. Okay, that should work. Now what I've done over here is simply to move the middleware logic, okay, the middleware function. I've extracted that logic and then put it in a new file, okay, so that this one handles everything about the logic that we need to either maybe create, update, delete the game, whilst this one will just focus on routing, okay, and then we have the main file pointing to the right routes, okay, so this looks good. Let me get rid of router here, we don't need it here. Let us restart the server. Let's get back to the browser. So in the browser, I'm just going to hit this endpoint again. It seems like it's working. Let us get all games. Sweet, it is still working. So everything looks good. Now that we've done a little bit of refactoring, let us create routes to create a game, to update a game, and then to delete a game. So before we do that, we have to create the logic, okay? So in a function, so in this case, we can do exports dot create game. So this function is going to create a game. We copy this, we add it here. For us to create a game, we just have to do const game. So we create a game object first, and then the ID, we can do games dot the length plus 1. So the length of the games, so let's say if the length of the games is 5, the games is 5, we just add 1 to it, so it becomes 6, and then that's the ID for the new game that will be created. For the name of the game, we can get that one from the request body. So we say name, and then we do request the body dot name. For the platform, we also get it from the request body. So we do request the body dot platform, and then finally the rating request dot body dot rating. In this case, for the rating, I want to do something a little bit odd. So I want to specify a default value such that if the user does not provide a value, we want it to be 0. So this is going to set the default to 0. If the user making the request or creating the game does not provide or specify a value for the rating, we just put 0. So after we've created a game object, we call games, then we do a push. We push game into the array we have. So if we have 5, it now becomes 6. And then when we are done, we just send that games back to the client. We also want to change the status code to 201 because 201 is the status code for creating a resource. After this is created, we have to go back to the routes and then add a new route for this. So we can do post. So post is for creating a new resource, and then games controller dot we do create game. That is it. So we've provided an endpoint to create a game. We don't have to do anything in server.js. This is looking good. Now we have to test the logic. We have to test the new route that we've created. In order to test this, we can't use the browser because the browser does a GET request by default. So you've noticed that when I pulled out the developer tools, we saw that the request that was going was GET, and then we get a status code for that, right? But if you want to test something like post, we'll need maybe an app for that. We'll need a different software for that. There are different softwares that you can use. We also have VS Code extensions that you can consider. However, the one I prefer to use is Postman. So I'm going to pull out Postman and then show you the user interface and then show you how to make the request to the server that is running locally on a device. So this is Postman, and then this is how the interface looks like. If we go to create collection, we are just going to create a new collection. I'll call that one game start. And then in here, we add a new folder. Add folder. We can call it games. So the collection is going to hold the resources, and then the folder is going to hold that particular API. Okay. So we can add a new request over here, and then we are going to make it a post request to localhost. Yep, this one, localhost slash API slash v1 slash games. And then we call this one create game. Yep, this looks good. And then we come to the body. The body, we want to choose raw and then select JSON. Then we do name. We'll call it, let's say, attack on Titans. So we've saved it over here. We have create game. Now we are writing JSON, so we just have to follow the JSON syntax. For the platform, we can say PC. We'll make it a string. We'll beautify this. And then for the rating, we should specify maybe 4. And then let's beautify. So with this that we've put in the body, and then with the request that we'll be making, they should create they should create a game called Attack on Titans, and then send back to us a response. Inside the response, we should be able to see this as part of it with an ID. Okay, but before you make this request, make sure you've restarted your server. Okay, so you've cancelled it inside your terminal, and then you've run the Node application again. Okay, so I'm sending this request. We got an error. The reason why we got this error, if you check what we have over here, it says type error, cannot read properties of undefined. Why this is happening is because the backend server cannot pass the JSON body that we are sending. Okay, so it cannot pass this JSON. In order for Express to be able to pass JSON, you have to specify a middleware. So you have to provide a middleware. This is because out of the box, Express does not do JSON parsing. Okay, but it provides you with a built-in middleware which you can use to parse your JSON. So I'm going to show you how to do that right now. Okay, in here in the code, we see type error cannot read properties of undefined name. Okay, if you click this, it takes you to where the error is happening. So it is happening over here. That's because if it checks request.body.name, it shows undefined, hence the error. So to fix this, like I said, we have to use a middleware. In order to use the middleware, we do app.use, and then we pass the middleware. In this case, it is going to be express.json. Okay, so like I said, this express.json, it is a middleware that is provided by Express. It is a built-in middleware provided by Express to pass JSON from the request. Let us restart the server. Server restarted. Let's make the request again. Now, after making the request, we see that the request is now successful. So we have success. We see 201 created. And then if we come to the bottom, we see an ID of 6 called Attack on Titans. Okay, so that's the new game we've created. Let us create another game. Let's say prototype 2. Okay, prototype 2. That gives a rating of 3.5. Send. Now we get an ID of 6, prototype 2, rating 3.5. So that is working. We can save this request. Let's get back to the IDE. We have seen how to create a game. Let us now create an endpoint for updating a game. So we go to games controller, and then we create a function to update a game. To do this, we can copy any of this, and then let's carefully make the changes. So update game. To update the game, we have to first get a game. So const game, and then to get a game, we will have access to the ID inside the parameter of the request. So for in the endpoint, we want to do /API/v1/games/ then the ID of the game we want to update. Okay, so in this case, if we do games.find index, or no, we can just do find, and then we pass a predicate. Okay, we can add element here, element, and then element.id is equal to parseInt of request.params.id. So this should give us the game. Okay, so we check over here if the ID of the elements, in this case of the game object, is equal to the number we've provided inside request.params.id, it is going to return the game. Now when we get our hands on the game, what we want to do is to modify the properties of the game. So we can do game dot we don't want to modify the ID, so we can do game.name equals request.body.name. If a name is not provided in the request, we just want to do game.name. So we just keep the name. You can also do game.rating equals request.body.rating. If that is not provided, we just want to keep game.rating. We also want to do game.platform. So request.body platform. If that is not provided, just do game.platform. Yeah, I think these are the three I would like to change. Now after the updates, we want to add the game back to the games array. So what we can do is we can do game.splice. Okay, and then for the index we can just do request.params dot id. Then we just do 1 and then pass game. So what this is going to do is it is going to do a replacement in place. So it will first take out the game, like the old game, and then put the newly updated game in the same place where the old game was. So we are just replacing it. Okay, so we are replacing the old one with the updated version of that particular game object. After that is complete, we just return the game. We change the status code to 200. Then we come to routes. Inside routes, we can just copy and paste one of these. I'll just copy this one. Change get to patch. And then I just do update game. That is all. Let us restart the server and then test. We create a new request. We'll call that one update game. So we want to update the game ID of 1. Let me add another request. So this new request, I just want to do get game, and let's send this request. So this is returning the game with the ID of 1. We can see it here. Let's save this one. Now for the update game, we are doing a patch request, and then we also want to update the game with the ID of 1. Inside the body, we choose raw, and then we choose JSON. We want to update the rating to before it was 4. We want to change the rating to 3. Let us send this request. You see, success. The ID of the game is 1. The name is God of War 3. The rating has been changed to 3. Before it was 4. So that endpoint is working. The endpoint we've created is working. We can now save this one. So we have the create game, we have update game, and then we have the get game requests. The next thing we want to look at is how to create an endpoint to delete a game. So we already have the get, we have the patch, we have the post. All we want to do now is to delete a game. To delete a game, it's very simple. So we copy one of these, paste it here. We call this function delete game, and we get rid of this. For the logic, we have to do so we first have to get an index of the game, and then after we get an index, we can do a splice on that game. Okay, so we pass the index to the splice function, and then we specify how many elements we want to remove. In this case, it is just 1. So that's what I mean. We do const, and then we do index of game. Then we do games dot find index. We pass an arrow function. So if we find an element that matches the definition we have here, then it is going to return the index of the element. So element dot id equals request. We should just do pass int request.params.id. So this one will give us the index of the game. The next thing we have to do is to do games.splice. Then we pass index of game, and then we do 1. So this is going to remove one element from this index, hence getting rid of the game we want to delete. After that is done, we can do status code of 204. So that is no content. That means the resource has been deleted. And then we can set the status to maybe success, and then we can return games. But if we do this, it is not going to return the JSON to the client. This is because anytime you set a response code to 204 in Express, it doesn't send anything to the client. Okay, so we'll test this one later. Let's get back to the route. In here in the route, we can just copy and paste we'll copy this one and then change get to delete. Then for the game controller, we change this one to delete game. Then that is it. We have restarted the server. Let's get back to Postman. In Postman, we just create a new request. We'll call it delete game. We set the URL. So let's say, first game 1. We change this one to delete. We don't need anything in the body. We send this request. It sends us 204, no content. To prove that the game has been deleted, we can create another request. Add request, get all games. This endpoint has already been created. So if we do this, we can see that there is no game with ID of 1. So game 2, game 3, game 4, game 5. Okay, we can delete more games. So let us delete game 3. So delete game. We do /3. No content. Let us get all games now. So we have 2, 4, 5. There is no game 3 now. So it is working. Yeah, we are done with this, and we are done with this endpoint. Now, after looking at the code, we can improve or refactor this a bit. So where we have router.patch, okay, where we have the endpoints that have /id, we can group all of them into, we can chain them. This is what I mean. So in order to chain them, we can do router.route, router.route, and then you just do / you specify the route, right? So / then you pass ID, then you do, so you can take, let's just write this get. So I can take everything I have here in this get, put it in here, then get rid of this. Then I can do another one, so delete. Okay, so I'm just chaining them. Then I can also do for patch. So I can get rid of these ones too. After doing this, everything should work normally. Okay, we can also do for this router, the route. Then we can do / for the post. We just have to do this, and then for get, we just do that, and then we get rid of this. Nice. So all we did was just to chain them. We have to remove the routes from here, so we don't need this anymore. We also don't need this. Okay, so everything has just been grouped together. Awesome. Let's just run this again. Now let's go to Postman to test. So after grouping everything together, we are just going to test. If we do get all games, it works. If we do get game, so this time we have to do maybe an ID of 4. It is also working. We can do update game. So let's see what we got for get all games. So let us update maybe game 5, right? Instead of rating of 0, we just want to do a rating of 5. Update game. We change this one to 5. And then rating, we want to give it 5. Send this request. It is working. Sweet. We can save everything. Finally, I've gotten to the part where I want to talk about middleware. So if you go to express.js.com and then you look for middleware, this is how they define middleware. Middleware functions are functions that have access to the request object, the response object, and the next function. Basically, they are saying middleware is any function that has the signature. So it has the request and then response and then next, okay, as parameters. Now, the next is not mandatory. Okay, so if you don't need it, you don't use it. So you can remove it and then it's still okay. Now, there are 3 types of middleware. We have the third-party middleware, we have the custom middleware, and then the built-in middleware. The built-in middleware is the middleware that ships with Express. So it comes with Express. For example, Express.json. This one is a built-in middleware. If you read here, it says returns middleware that only passes JSON and only looks at request where content type header matches the type option. Okay, so this middleware comes with Express, so it's a built-in middleware. There's also another built-in middleware called Express.static. We'll have a look at that. And then we have the custom middleware. The custom middleware is the middleware that you create yourself, so the one that you write yourself. Then we have the third-party middleware. These middlewares are usually packages that you can download from NPM to do whatever you want to in Express. Okay. Let us look at how to use the Express.static middleware. So that one is very simple. So app.use, and then you specify the route. So slash, we'll call it gallery. Then we specify, okay, we do express.static. So we are specifying the middleware we want to use. In here, we write the folder or the path to a directory. So in this case, we can say public / images. So what does this middleware do? This middleware allows you to serve static files from your server. So this can be images or any static file that you want. You can serve it from this middleware. At the moment, we've not created this directory. So if you look here, there's nothing like public / images, right? So we are going to create this directory. We create a folder. We call it public. And then we create another subfolder in there. We'll call it images. Oh, I created a file rather. Yeah, move to recycle bin. I'll create a folder. I'll call it images. And then inside images, I want to move, you see the image I have here, the one in starter files. I just want to copy it and then move it to images. So I'll paste it in here. So we have 2 of them, but we are interested in the one in public / images over here. So by writing this code, we'll be able to serve this file, okay, public / images in our browser. So to test that, let us go to the browser. In the browser, we just have to go to localhost 3000 and then hit /gallery, then the name of the file that is being served. So in this case, it was plan.jpg. The moment we press the enter, we see that we're able to serve that file from our server. Okay. If I go back to the code and then I remove this line of code, then restart the server. Let's go back to the browser. Now if I press enter again, it says I cannot get gallery slash plan.jpg. The reason is that we've taken out the middleware that serves static files. Okay, so that's how to use express.static. We can uncomment this one. Now let us see how to write custom middlewares. In fact, we've been writing custom middlewares, okay, but just for demo purpose, I just want to write a new one. So we can call this one log custom, and then it is going to be a function. It has access to request, response, and then next. And because it's a middleware, we can just do app.use. Then we pass log custom middleware. What we want this function to do is just to log this to the console each time a request comes in. If you look at the middlewares over here, anytime a request comes in, it goes through everything over here. Okay, so the first thing it does is it does express.json, then it goes to log custom middleware, then it goes like that. That means that any request that comes to the server, we are going to be logging custom middleware, custom middleware, custom middleware, no matter the path. Okay, so to test this, let us go to Postman. Now in Postman, we can send a request. Now when we send this request, we're expecting a response, right? A response of a game with the ID of 4, but our request is hanging. The reason why this is so is because we have not called the next function. In here in our code, all we did was console.log. However, we did not call the next function. What the next function allows you to do is it allows you to move to the next middleware in the call stack, okay, or in the request response lifecycle. Okay, so if we do next, and then we save, let's make the request again. This time we got a response, okay, because when the first middleware was called and then we go to the custom middleware, after it's executed console.log and then we called next, it goes to the next middleware in the call stack, okay, in the middleware call stack. So over here we see that we have custom middleware logged. Let's just do multiple requests, and then we'll see that if we make, let's say, 5 requests, then we'll have 5 custom middleware. If we do 6, we'll see 6 custom middleware being logged to the console, because with each request that comes in, we go through this middleware first. So I'm going to make another request, maybe get all games. I'm going to hit this one maybe multiple times, and let's see. So we have that showing inside the console multiple times, custom middleware, custom middleware, custom middleware. Cool. So that's how you write a custom middleware. And like I said before, we've been writing custom middleware. So this one is a custom middleware. This one is a custom middleware. If you check here, it has the request, response, and then next. You may be wondering why these requests are not hanging, because we are not calling next, right? The reason why that is because they are the last middleware. Okay, and then you terminate a middleware by using response dot maybe send or response.json or something. So the moment you call response.status.json, then you are terminating the middleware. Okay, so it terminates the entire flow because you are sending a response back to the user. Now for the third-party middlewares, I can show an example by installing Morgan. So we can do npm I Morgan. This is going to add Morgan to our project. So it has added new packages. If we have a look in here, package.json, we see Morgan has been added, right? And then we can use Morgan. So what is Morgan? Morgan is a package or a middleware that helps you to log like it helps you to log the details of requests and then responses to in your server. So we can do app.use. First, let us import Morgan. Let me import it here. Const Morgan, and then I do require Morgan. Okay, then I do app.use, then Morgan. You have to specify how, like, you have to specify the options that you have, like in terms of options of login. Okay, so if you want it to be logged as combined, it does that. As dev, it does that. Short tiny. So all these options have um it changes the style of the output of the logs. Okay, so let's just select dev and then run this, run the project again. Let's make a request. So we can make this patch request again. In the console, we can see patch and then API v1 games and then the time. Okay, so basically that's what Morgan does. So it just gives you details about the request and then the responses. So how long it took for the request to be completed, 28 milliseconds. Let's do another request. This time we can do get all games. So in the get all games, we see that we get API slash v1 slash games, and then the status code is 200, and then how long it took, and then the size of the response. So that's third-party middlewares. So in this section, we've gone through all the types of middlewares. We've gone through the built-in middlewares. We've gone through the custom middlewares. We've gone through the third-party middlewares. What I want us to do is to look at the dangers of using middleware, okay, or queuing multiple middlewares. What do I mean by that? So for example, if you want to add multiple middlewares to this patch request, okay, so it is not just update game, but like multiple middlewares. So let's say processing middlewares, like you want to process images, okay. The moment you begin to add multiple middlewares to this path, it can cause some kind of latency in your design, okay. So what do I mean by that? If we go to, so in here in this file, inside the games controller, we want to add a new middleware. So we can call that process images. Okay, process images. That is going to be an async function because we want to simulate a request that takes a long time to fulfill. So in here we have our request, response, and then next. So if we don't bring next, the request is going to be hanging because we will not go to the next middleware. That's why we need a next. Then the other thing we want to do is to use set timeout to simulate this event. Okay, so set timeout. In here, so the first parameter of the set timeout is going to be, or let's say the first argument is going to be a callback function, which is already here. So we can just say image processing complete, and then just at the top we can say image processing started. Okay, this looks good. So we're going to first try to simulate this. We should know that set timeout is going to it is an async function. Okay, so the moment you execute this, or let us set a time. So let's say 2 seconds. So I've put here 2000 because 2000 milliseconds, right? So 2000 milliseconds is 2 seconds. Now, because this is an async function, the moment you execute this one, it is going to be queued. Okay, so when 2 seconds is up, then whatever you specify inside the callback that you specified for the set timeout function is going to be executed. And because it is asynchronous, it doesn't stop, it doesn't break the flow of your code. That means that if we execute line 10, we'll go ahead and execute line 11. Okay, line 11 to 13, but we are not going to wait for it. Okay, and then we continue to line 14. You get it? So that's how the flow is going to be like. So we are going to test with this, then later I'll just introduce the delay. Okay, so we stop the server. Okay, we stopped it and then we start again. Now let us go to Postman. Okay, here in Postman, what we want to do is we want to fetch all the games. So this request gets all the games. Now that we have all the games, we want to update one of the games. Okay, so maybe the one with the ID of 5. Over here, we see that the rating is 0. So we are going to update it with a rating of 5. Let us send this request. We have updated it with a rating of 5. Let us see what we have in the console. Okay, here in the console, nothing happens. Yeah, it's basic. It's just because we did not add it here. So we can do games controller dot, then let's say process images. Okay, we've added it here. Let us restart. So I'm going to make the request again. I'm rating of 5. Get a response. It took 18 milliseconds. Now back to the code. Okay, we notice that we got image processing started. Then later the request was fulfilled. Okay, and then we later got image processing complete. So that was the asynchronous nature I was trying to describe. If we go back to game controller, when we executed set timeout, right, it was queued inside a function called start, right? And then after the 2 seconds was up, whatever we specified in the callback was then called. Okay, so the request was even fulfilled before the callback was called. Okay, now in order to make this one delay, okay, just to simulate what we are talking about, I'm just going to use the Promisify inside utility. Okay, so const, I'll just say fire utils is fine, util, and then I'm going to extract Promisify, and then I'm going to create I'll say set timeout promise, and then I will do Promisify. So basically I'm wrapping it with that, okay, with set timeout. So I can just do this. So this is going to wrap set timeout into a promise so that we can await it, okay, so that we can perfectly simulate the async task. So in here, we want to get rid of set timeout and replace it with set timeout promise. So we can call it set timeout promise. And then we specify the number of seconds. So in this case, 2 seconds. And then we put await here. Because it is a promise, we can await it. Okay. Now, because when I got rid of set timeouts, I got rid of the value we had in the callback, okay, or the callback function. The moment we do Promisify, we lose the callback because it now becomes a promise. So what we can do here is after 2 seconds, we are going to say image processing completed. So the code we had in the beginning, basically it is the same code. However, we are awaiting the set timeout. Okay, after 2 seconds, let us stop this process and start again. Now let us go back to Postman. Here in Postman, let us make the same request. Maybe let's change the rating to 3. Now we can see that it took about 2 seconds and then about 8 milliseconds, right? Yeah, so you can see that the request is taking 2 seconds. Now let us make another one. it takes another 2 seconds. So this time we are awaiting the promise. Now the whole point of this is to prove that if you have a particular middleware function that takes a longer time, okay, or you have multiple middleware functions that are taking or consuming lots of time, it is going to affect the latency of your request. Let us do more. Now back to the code. In here we have the process images. Let us add another middleware. So instead of process image, let us call it log details. Okay, let us call it log details. Good. So you can say login started, and then login completed. So I'm going to add log details right here. So game controller dot log details. Let us stop the server now and then start it. Let us get back to Postman. We're going to make the same request again. Okay, this time it took about 4 seconds. Okay, so the request took twice as long. This is because each middleware takes about 2 seconds. Okay, so I'm not including the last middleware, but the 2 middlewares before the last one, each of them is taking 2 seconds. So that is what is reflected. So the whole point of this is to let you know that you can add multiple middlewares. However, if you're adding your middlewares, just be careful because if you have multiple middlewares that are taking longer times or they are compute intensive, or maybe the request they are making to a particular server is taking too long, it can affect the latency of the request, and the client is going to experience that. Okay, I think we've covered everything about middleware. I also wanted to point out that you can conditionally choose the middleware you want to go to. So for example, you can have multiple middlewares in here. Okay, and then based on the request, okay, based on the request you have, or based on maybe a field you have in this request, you can choose which middleware to route to. So you can have an if statement, and then if based on whatever property you have inside the request. So maybe body does something, right? You can choose what middleware you want to route to. So you can conditionally route, or you can conditionally choose what middleware you want to point to. So that is something that is very possible. I just wanted to mention that. Okay, we've covered the key stuff about middleware. The next thing I want to do is just to go ahead with what I have in the starter file. So I just want to create the endpoints for reviews. I think we've created post, we've created get, we've created patch, we've created delete. Let's see. For games route. Yeah, we have get, we have patch, we have post. Yeah, and we have. So I'm just going to do the ones for reviews. You can watch me do that quickly. Okay, so I'm done providing the endpoints um for the reviews. Okay, so it seems like everything is working. So if I'm not getting any errors in the terminal, however, I'll just do some little test. But when you are writing your code, you can test to make sure that everything is working. Okay, so the whole point of the tutorial, like I said, is just to get a key concepts across. Okay, so it's not to maybe thoroughly test whatever is happening over here. However, to the best of my knowledge, I think I've implemented this correctly. So when you look at a review controller, it's basically the same as the games controller. Okay, just that we are dealing with review objects now. So I have something like get review, get all reviews, create review, update review, and then delete review. So basically the CRUD operations. Okay. Now because we've created or we've sorted out um, like all the codes that we have into different components. So in this case, for example, with the controllers, everything is nicely sorted. So when we are dealing with reviews, we know that maybe we are talking about review controllers. If we are talking about routes, we know that we are talking about the review route, and then everything is now being fed from server. Okay, so in terms of the endpoints over here, so what you see here, after I have provided the controllers and then the routes for review, I came in here to the server.js, and then I added a new route. Okay, so review route, and then in here I specified API slash v1 slash reviews. Okay, so any request that is coming on this path is for these routes. Now let us do some few tests in Postman. Okay, here in Postman, let me duplicate this, and I'll call it reviews. Okay, so remember, instead of games, we'll just do reviews. And then instead of updates game, so instead of games over here, we just do reviews. Then get game, let's call it get review. And then we change this one to reviews. Let us send this request. So you see, we're able to get the review of ID of 4. If we change it to an ID of 1, you see, we get our review. So it wasn't a waste of money. And then the rating is 1, and then the game is a game ID of 1. So we can change this one to delete review. And then we change this one to reviews. So if we send this request, no content, let us get all reviews. So we change this one to get all reviews. We change this to reviews. So in here, we have two reviews of ID of, no, we have multiple reviews of ID with 4. Comes that later. Okay, so let us just save delete reviews. We'll just save this one. We'll save that update game. And it's actually update reviews. Update review. Then we can save this. Just close these ones. And then create game. It is actually create reviews. So create review. We can save this one to get our reviews. Let us save this. reviews now. All right, so create reviews, update review, get reviews, get our reviews here. So everything looks good now. So there are two more routes I want to talk about. Okay. Let's see. Let's go to Postman. So if I take, for example, the reviews, okay. So get all reviews, and I make this request. You see that we're able to get all the reviews that we have, all the review objects, right? So ID of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? But what if we want to return the reviews for a particular game? Okay, so what I mean is, what if we do this and then we say game equals, for example, 1. Now what we have over here becomes the query. I've already talked about this one. So if we send this to the server, we should be able to return all games with the ID of 1. In this case, because the query is not being used, we still return all reviews. So how do we go about this? There are actually like two main ways. Let's see. So inside the code, what we want to do is this. We want to go to get our reviews because we know that the query is on the request, right? What we can do here is we can check. But before we do the checking, I want to explain this. If you are writing this endpoint in a real world application or in your actual project, what you'll be doing is you'll be making a request using a database engine. Okay, so you're going to query the database with the values that you're getting from the query as filter. Okay, so you pass that one to the database engine and then you're able to get the results you need. But in our case, we are not connected to any database, and then we are using JavaScript arrays. So we have to be able to use the functions, or let me say the methods that are on the array data type. Okay, so let's see. So I want to do a check. So if request the query, okay, the games. So I want to specifically check for games. It's not equal to null. I want to do the following. In our case, I want to do const, and then I'll call this, let's say, filtered reviews. And then I'm going to assign that one to reviews dot filter. Then I'm going to pass in a predicate, right? So I catch the element over here. And then if the element dot game is the same as request, but know that when you pass the value inside the query, it is a string, right? So what we need to do is we have to pass it to an integer. So we can do pass int on that one, and then we do request dot query dot, and then here we pass game. Okay, I think this looks about just right. Now we have the filtered reviews. So this is going to return all reviews where the game property is equal to the value of the game field inside the query. So we have to do a return, and then we do basically everything we have over here. So the reason why I'm bringing return to this part of the code, to this block of the code, is so that if this line is executed, we don't go ahead to execute line 46. The only time we execute line 46 is if this condition fails. Okay, and we also have to change data to filtered reviews. So we can change that one to filtered reviews. Let's test. Okay, so when we run this, we're able to get the game, we're able to get a review for the game with an ID of 1. What about a review for the game with an ID of, let's say, 2? Now we get 2 reviews. Okay, and if you look at the game field, it is a game of 2, just like we specified over here. Now, the other endpoint I want us to have a look at is, what if we want, now if you look at the structure of games, so for example, get game, over here, we see that you're able to get a game with an ID of 4. Okay, but what if you want to get a game, what if you want to get reviews for the game with an ID of 4? So basically, this endpoint, right? What if you want something like this? How do you do this? Now, if you want to do something like this, there are 2 main ways you can do this, okay? Let me just go into the code to explain that. Now, in here in the code, if you check the reviews route, what we can do, if you check the games route actually, what we can do is, so this is the endpoint we want to do. So let's see, this is the endpoint. So API slash v1 slash was it games? Yeah, games, and then an ID of maybe 2, and then reviews. Okay, so this is the endpoint that we want. In order to do this, what we can do is we can define that endpoint over here. And because we've already defined this first part, what we can do is we can say ID slash reviews. But we don't want that, because in order to do this, we have to import the reviews router and then use that one to define the routes. But that's not what we want. So in this case, the best thing to do is to pass the request onto the review route, so that the review route will handle the request. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Now we know that router is a middleware. So what we can do is we can do router dot use. Then we specify the endpoint. So like this. So we say, and if it has an ID, right? What's wrong with my keyboard? Yeah, if it has an ID, and then it is pointing to reviews. What you want to do is we want to import the review router. Okay, review route, and then so we can do a require here and bring in review routes. So if the endpoint is following this path, right? You want to give the request to the review route so that the review route will handle it. Now, if we enter the review route, when the request comes in, it is going to check. Okay, the request was a GET request, so it is coming to this path. It is not going to this path. The reason why it doesn't come to this path is if you look at the structure, right? It is pointing to reviews. Okay, so it is definitely going to this path, because if you look at server, right, reviews, and then the routes for reviews is this one. Okay, basically it is this entire route that has been defined here. However, because it is a GET request, so this is where it is going to come to. You get it? Now when it comes here, remember that we have a parameter, right? We have a parameter on this request. So that was the ID. So we want to be able to extract the parameter, because based on the parameter, we are going to return some data to the user. So in this case, if we come back to review routes, we need to call, we need to pass an object called merge params. Okay, then we set it to true. So if you read more about this merge params from the documentation, it says that it preserves the request.params value from the parent router. If the parent router and the child have conflict, param names, the child value will take precedence. So basically what it's trying to say is if you look here, whatever parameters we have over here, they are passed to the child. So in this case, the review route is the child, and then this is the route that inherits the parent parameters. So in this case, if it gets to this point, we are going to have access to the ID parameter. Now let us get inside the get all reviews. Because we already have access to the ID parameter, what we can do is we can do something like this. We can do request.params.id. Okay, this is fine. This will work, but I just want to do this, so I'll call it constant, and then I'll say filter. I'll just call it, yeah, I'll just say filter, and then I'm going to assign it to request.query.game. Okay, and if that is not available, I want to do request.param.id, and if that is not available, then I want to just do a null. Okay, at this point I'll just say if filter is not equal to null, I want to pass filter to this function. Now that we've written the filter, I believe everything should work. So let's restart this. Let's go back to Postman and then test. Fingers crossed. Okay, back in Postman. Now this is what I want to do. I want to add another folder. So add folder. I'm going to call it let's say game slash review, and then I'm going to add a new request in here. Add request. There's going to be a new request, right? We can just call that one games slash review, and then the path is going to be, let's use this one as an example. So if we query for game, yeah, we should get that. So that is the game. Okay, this is the game. Now if we add review, okay, reviews, yeah, if we do this, let's see. Nice. Now what we are getting here is the reviews. Okay, so you can see that we are getting reviews, or let me say review object, and then the game is of ID 4. Now let us change this one to an ID of 1. Okay, now we are getting the game with an ID, the reviews for the game with an ID of 1. Let us do the reviews with the game with an ID of 4. Okay, we've done 4, let's do 3. So that one gives us the review for the game with an ID of 3. So this is what we call nesting routes, okay, in Express.js. Now we are going to talk about templating in Express.js and how you can use it to create dynamic and reusable web pages. We'll be focusing on AJS, which stands for Embedded JavaScript, because of its simplicity and powerful features. So let's get started. Templating engines allow you to create HTML templates with dynamic content that can be rendered on the server before being sent to the client. This means you can pass in variables, use loops, conditionals, and even include other files to create complex layouts. Without templating engines, you'd be stuck with static HTML, and you'd manually have to concatenate strings in your HTML or JavaScript code, which can get real messy fast. An example of a static web page can be the landing page for a website. So on there, you can see that nothing much is really happening. All the items or contents on that particular web page has been already written, and then it doesn't change. So that is a static website. A dynamic website can be a website that shows the prices of stocks, because with that one, the prices keep changing frequently. Now let us start to implement EJS in our code. In order to implement EJS, we first have to install EJS. So npm I EJS. So this is going to add EJS to our dependencies. Now that we have EJS, we have to set the view engine in Express. In order to set the view engine, we can do that one after, let's say, after this. So we put that one on line 16. In order to do that, we do app.set, and then we specify, we say view engines or view engine, and then we use EJS. After we have set a view engine, the next thing we have to do is to create a route. So what that route would do is, if a user hits that endpoint, we are going to serve a web page from that particular route. So what we can do is this, we do app.use, so the usual stuff, app.use, and then we specify the route. So we can say /home page, and then we will pass our middleware. So request and then response. Then in here, what we are going to do is we are going to do response. Instead of doing response.send or response.json, we are going to do response.render because we want to show a web page. We want to render a web page. So response.render. And then we are going to specify the file that we want to render. So in this case, let us call it index. Then we pass the next value we want to pass in the parameter is the data we want to pass to that particular web page or that particular web page. So in this case, we can pass an object. So we can say title. Then we'll call it maybe my home page. Then we can pass another thing, maybe a message we want to put in a body. So welcome to EJS tutorial. This is looking good. The other thing we have to do is we have to create the file. Okay, the file that we want to render. By default, Express looks for that file inside a folder called views folder. If you want to change the views, the file that Express looks for, or the file that you are storing, the folder that you are storing your index file in, you can use app.set, and then you have views. Then you specify the file path. So this is going to set it is going to change the directory for the views folder, which Express looks for this index file in. So we are going to create a views folder here, the default. So we'll add a new folder here. We'll call it views. After we've created views, we have to create the index file. So we'll call that index.ejs. That's going to be the file format. Because I'm using this package that shows icons in VS Code, you can see that the icon has changed for EJS. Now the next thing we have to do is we have to paste an EJS template over here, which is very much like HTML. So if I go to my starter files, I have some few data that we can use. We can use this one. So I'll just copy this and then bring it here. First, let me just remove. I'll just take those ones out. Then bring it here. I can now take these things off. Let me format this document. Okay, looking good. So what does this HTML do? So basically the structure is just like our usual HTML. We have the doc type, we have HTML, we have the head. Inside the head we have the title. Okay, so we are getting this title from the object that we are passing from. We are passing inside the server.js file, and then the same thing for message. So inside the body element we have an h1, and we are getting the message from the objects we are passing to this EJS file from the server.js. So this is the syntax for reading a variable you're passing. So you have to use a percentage and then equal, then the name of the variable, okay, and then you use percentage to end it. If you want to write JavaScript too, you start with percentage, right? So we'll have a look at that one too. Now that we are done with this, let us run node server.js. Now let us go to our web browser. Now inside our web browser, let us target localhost 3000 and then home page. You see, now we have this nice HTML written out saying welcome to EJS. And then if you look at the title of the tab, it is called homepage, my homepage. Now let us change something in here. So let's say we want to change the text for the message. So we can change this one to EJS. It's fun. Now if we stop the server and then we start again, and then we refresh the page, we can see EJS is fun. Now, I want to show you another thing that you can do with EJS. So let's say you want to create a header and then a footer. This header and footer will be reused over multiple pages. So what you can do is you can introduce something called partials in EJS. So we can create a folder and then we will say partials. And then in here, we will create a file called header.ejs. So basically, we are going to create something like a component, a header component, which we can use on any web page we want to use it on. So I have some code written out for the header. Let me comment this one out. And then uncomment this. Oh, why is it not uncommenting? All right, let me just do this quickly. So I'm going to take this from here and bring it in here. Format this one quickly. Then go to the index.ejs. So inside the index.ejs, we want to put the header in here. So in order to do that, we just put this here, and then we do include, and then we are going to specify where it is. So this is under partials, and then slash header. But then we have to put a percentage, right? So percentage here, and then percentage there. Let us stop the server, start again. Now let's go to the browser. Inside the browser, we just have to refresh the web page. Now after we refresh the web page, we see a new text added. So we have header, my super cool header. Now what if we are passing down maybe an array of objects, okay, but then we want to render a list based on the array of objects that we have. In order to do that, that is also quite simple. In order to do that, we can just pass the variable to the index file and then use a loop to create list items, right? So if we go to data.ejs, data.js, I have a code for that one too. So I can simply do this. Let me just copy what I have here. So these are just simple HTML codes. So it's nothing complex. I'm just bringing it in here to index.ejs, and then at the message level, I just put this here, and then I format the document. So in this case, what I want to do is I want to pass an array of games, and then for each game, I render it as a list item, and that is going to be the child of the unordered list element. So if we go to server.js, we want to pass a third thing. So we'll call that one games. But then we already have games. Okay, we don't have games here. So let's say I'll call it games array. Games array. At this point, we don't have games array. It is undefined. So we can go to the starter files again, and then data.js. We can export these games. So we can do exports dot games. Then we come back here. In here we can import games. So we can say const and then games, but then we want to change it to games array. We do require. Then the path for the file, it is in starter files / data games array. We have games array here. Cool. Everything looks fine. Now in the browser, let us hit this endpoint again. Nice. So we find that the value for the games object that we passed to the EJS template is what we are rendering over here. So it is an unordered list, and then we have this list elements in here. Now, as your template grow, remember to keep them maintainable by breaking them into smaller partials and keeping the logic minimal. Templating engines are powerful tools, but the real art is knowing how to use them effectively and when to use them. And there you have it, folks. The basic introduction of Express and then EJS. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more web development tips and tutorials. Thanks for watching. Happy coding.